Hey everybody, it's Dave here at Bluebears Games, and this week's video is a Blues Budget Battle Brews or a Quad B video. This week's video I have chosen to go with my black-green or Golgari version. It's called Golgari Deathtouch Tribal. So it's a pretty simple basic deck, but it has a good punch to it. So the theme here is all the creatures have Deathtouch, and then one of the creatures actually it gives you a lot of benefit from each of those creatures having Deathtouch. So I'm going to go over the deck, I'm going to give my tip of the day, and then, if you have any questions or concerns at the end of the video, go ahead and message me. So let's get started on the deck. So, as I said, everything in here revolves around the Deathtouch theme. So we start off with your 1-drop, and it's going to go in a basic 1, 2, 3, 4 order as far as keeping on what's called curve for your mana, so that you play a land, you play a creature, you play a second land, you play a bigger creature, so on and so forth. It's trying to curve out. So the 1-drop is Sedge Scorpion, which is a 1 to cast 1/1 with Deathtouch. And this 2-drop is a Thrill Kill Assassin. I've got 4 Sedge Scorpions in there, by the way. There are 4 Thrill Kill Assassins. It's a 2 to cast with Deathtouch. It's a 1/2, but it has Unleash, which means that you may have this creature enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, and it can't block if it has that counter, so it would be a 2/3. Deathtouch, usually what happens when you're doing combat with Deathtouch is most people don't want to block them because no matter what, their creature dies, even if it's bigger. So that's kind of the reason why this deck actually can work a little bit better than most as far as a tribal deck goes. The 3-drop is Daggerback Basilisk. It's a 3 to cast 2/2 Deathtoucher. There are a playset of those in here as well. The first uncommon here is Grim Dancer. It is 2 black and 1 for a 3/3, so it's a 3 to cast 3/3. And then when it enters the battlefield, it comes into play with your choice of 2 counters among the following. So it can get Menace, Deathtouch, and Lifelink. Most likely you're going to choose Deathtouch and Menace just so that it can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, meaning that you can kill 2 creatures that are blocking it no matter what because of the Deathtouch. So that's why that's in there. The basis of the deck is based around this card right here. It's Hooded Blightfang. It's a 3 to cast 1/4. Not great stats, but that's not the point of this. It has Deathtouch itself, and then the ability is what it revolves around. So whenever a creature you control with Deathtouch attacks, doesn't even have to do damage, whenever it attacks, each opponent you have loses a life and you gain a life. And then whenever a creature you control with Deathtouch deals damage to a Planeswalker, you destroy that Planeswalker no matter how much damage you did. So my first suggestion, if you do purchase this deck, and yes, this deck is for sale, is you replace the 3-drop Dagger Basilisks for 3 more Blooded or Hooded Blightfangs, and that pretty much rounds out the deck really nicely. In my Blues Budget Battle Brews, I only have 4 total rares, and they are all different for the most part. So that's my first suggestion. If you do something with this deck, I would definitely go get 3 more Hooded Blightfangs and go ahead and put them in here. Up next is Embodiment of Agonies. It's also a 3 to cast. It's a flying Deathtouch, which there aren't very many of those. When it enters the battlefield, it comes into play with +1/+1 counters on it for each different mana cost among non-land cards in your graveyard. Now let me explain that real fast. So, Sedge Scorpion is a 1 version of a casting cost. It's 1 green. Thrill Kill is a different one. It's a 1 black and 1 of any. Daggerback Basilisk is a 1 green and 2 of any. That's another one. Grim Dancer is a 2 black and 1. That's different from 1 black and 2 of any, like Hooded Blightfang. So these are 2 different casting costs according to Embodiment of Agonies. You've got Agent of Fates. I'll go into the rest of the cards to show you the different ones, but if I did my math correctly, there are 11 different converted mana costs or mana values that can make this come into play, with 11 counters making a 11/11 flying Deathtoucher. So that's why that's in here. But the Deathtouch, that's the important part. The next rare is Agent of Fates. Again, it's a 3 to cast, so it's 2 black and 1 of any. It's a 3/2, so great power toughness for converted mana cost. Deathtouch, and then it has Heroic. So whenever you cast a spell that targets Agent of Fates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. I'll get into the little tech that is with this guy in a minute. I would go ahead and put, if you do purchase this deck and want to upgrade it, this is the next one I would put more of in. Death Gaze Cockatrice is a flying Death Toucher for 4. It's a 2/2 flyer, and there's 4 of them in there. The foil, because every deck gets a foil, is Zathrid Gargan. It's a 6 cast, 3/6 Death Toucher. Its ability says for 1 black and 2 of any, you can tap it, put a petrification counter on target creature. It gains Defender and becomes a colorless artifact in addition to its other costs, and its activated abilities can't be activated. So what that does is it kind of nullifies your opponent's creatures. If you're not able to kill it, say it's got something like Indestructible, this guy can basically nullify anything. It's like a good Eldrazi killer. So you can't kill it, but it basically renders it useless. And also it has Death Touch. Seek the Wilds is a card that I've learned in the last couple weeks that for green is probably pretty much basically green card draw. So for 2, you look at the top 4 cards of your library and you may reveal a creature or a land card from among them. Put it in your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. There's 20-something creatures in here and 20 lands, so you're going to hit on that. Play set of those. And this is where the Death Touch theme really hits and shines. So green has a lot of effects. Technically, they're all fight, but not all of them are fight. Some of them are half fight, meaning that they do their damage to a creature, but the creature doesn't deal it back. When you use certain aspects of the fight mechanic, specifically your creature does damage to another thing, Death Touch comes into play. So even if you only deal 1 damage with something like an Ambuscale, or I believe I have another one in here, Hunter's Edge, yeah, that 1 damage is a Death Touch damage. It will kill the creature. So Ambuscale itself is 3 to cast. It targets a creature you control and gives it +1/+0 until end of turn, so that's always a bonus. And it deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent controls. That's the creature dealing damage, and the creatures have Death Touch, so it always kills something if it's not indestructible. Another version of that is Hunter's Edge. It's 4 to cast. You put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then that creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Again, it's Death Touch damage. It's going to kill whatever it hits, unless it has indestructible. So there's a play set of them. Because I wanted to go with that whole different converted mana costs or mana values, and each one matters depending on what color and how many of each there was in there. Walk the Plank adds to that 11 different kinds of converted mana costs. It's 2 black, destroy a non-merfolk. You're most likely not going to face a lot of merfolk creatures. It's pretty much going to kill anything that you want. Blood Curdle also fits that theme of trying to have different converted mana costs and everything. It's 1 black, 3 of any, and it destroys a creature, and then you may put a menace counter on a creature you control. The synergy there is that you want your creatures to have menace so that if they do have to block, it's 2 creatures, yours will die, but both of theirs will die no matter what, as long as it has enough power to deal the damage. So, like Sedge Scorpion being a 1/1 won't kill both creatures because it can't deal it to everybody, but every other creature in here should pretty much, I mean, you unleash the Thrill Kill, it'll have 2 power, and everything else, the Daggerback Basilisk should have it. Yeah, so everything else in here should be able to kill 2 creatures. Got a play set of those. And then the lands. The lands are pretty basic. We're going to go with 4 Golgari Deathtouch because you need the duels. In any setting where you want to upgrade this deck, you're going to go with any better lands that don't come into play tapped. But for now, this will work for the budgetary reasons. Remember, this is $20, not much more. 2 Terramorphic Expanses so that you can mana fix. So it's 2 colors. In case you're missing one, you can go get the other. And then the rest are basically forests and swamps. So that's the themes of the deck. So, you know, you're trying to get the Hooded Blightfang to do most of the damage for you by just attacking with your creatures, hoping your opponents don't block, so you do damage there. And then you get the Aristocrats style effect of the making your opponents lose a life and you gaining a life. So that is my version of, this is one of my more original ones. This is my Golgari Deathtouch tribal deck. This is one of my Blues Budget Battle Brews. It is $20. I am selling this. I have decided I'm going to make a change to the way that I do my sales. Going forward, instead of doing like the discounts, it's too confusing. From now on, it's $20 plus $6 shipping for the first deck. And then after that, it's $20 per deck and free shipping basically for the whole order if you go ahead and order more than one deck. So that's what I'm going to do going forward. It eliminates all that whole what's the discount price and all that stuff. That's it. It's $20 per deck. If you buy more than one, shipping's free. Simple, basic, clean. All right. Now, for my tip of the week, I had a struggle as to which way I wanted to go. I was originally going to go with a commander-centric like tip, but I realized that these are not commander decks, and not everybody watching these will care about the commander aspect of the game, or if they do, they can come back to it later. But I'm not going to do that this week. This week I'm going to go over a very basic thing for Magic, because not everybody understands this, and I didn't realize how little people understood the colors of Magic and what their simple tasks and what they want to do are. So my tip of this week is going to be a basic overview of the colors in Magic. That is black, blue, green, red, and white. Okay, we're not going to go in the color list right now, but the 5 basic simple colors and what their overview or what their scheme is, what they like to do. So I'm going to start off with the simplest color to learn and play with, and that's green. Green is usually a beginner color. There are 2 colors that are usually beginner, then there's an intermediate one, and then there's the more advanced ones, and I'll tell you which one's which. So green is the simplest one. Its basic overview of green is it's the color of nature. Black and blue are the enemy colors, so that means that white and red are the friendly colors, okay? So there are black and blue cards, and enemy colors, what that means is that they have cards specifically that go against them. So anti-green cards would be black and blue. The focus for green is on big creatures and using them to do damage. So while this deck doesn't have big creatures, it has nice, utility creatures. But most of the time, green is all about the big stompy creatures. The main actual creature types for green are usually elves and beasts. There are more, obviously, but that's the ones that are prominent in the color. Okay, and then not much interaction except through combat with your opponent. So the interaction with your opponent usually is through combat, not through spells. The next color that's somewhat easy to learn is going to be red. It's the color of fire and lightning, and usually land destruction. Blue and white are the enemy colors. The focus is usually on direct damage, and usually small creatures used as fodder to sacrifice for other big damage things, or hasty small little things that are just annoying. The focus was that. The main creatures for red are usually goblins and elementals. And again, there's going to be other ones that it uses, but for the most part, you're going to see more goblins and elementals than anything. And there's lots of interaction with your opponent with red, because you're mostly doing it by casting spells and combat. So you have little creatures, usually goblins, and direct damage like lightning bolts and shocks. So you are going to interact with your opponent a lot. The middle color to learn is usually white. It's a little easier to learn than that. It's a little bit more difficult to learn than red and green to play with in Magic, but it's not all that hard. It's just slightly above, only because white's kind of the weaker of the colors when it comes to certain things. It can do a lot of things, but it has a lot of things it can do not well. It's like the jack of all trades. It does many things, but it's a master of none. So white is the color of holy, or however you want to put it. I'm not a religious person, so it's the holy color. Black and red are its enemy colors. The focus for white is usually on small and efficient creatures, life gain, and enchanting those creatures to make them bigger. The main creature types in white are usually knights and angels. And the interactions for your opponent is usually based on the build, and it usually is a lot. So it's going to have spells that you interact with your opponents. Usually, like a Wrath of God will make it so that you wipe a board, and board wiping means killing all the creatures on the board. Combat through white, we call them white weenie creatures. So usually two to cast 2/2s. Usually they have some type of ability like First Strike and protection for something. So there is some interaction with your opponents there. It's not, it's not like red where you're doing damage to the face and then attacking with creatures, but there is some. Up next on the board, as far as a little bit more difficult, is black. Black is the color of death. You can tell that by the fact that its mana symbol is a skull. White and green are its enemy colors. The black's focus is usually on hurting itself or self-sacrificing to win. And also recurring things from the graveyard to play them. And lately, it's more searching your library. But that's another story. So, sacrificing itself, either its life or its own creatures, to win, and recurring from the graveyard. Main creatures in black are usually zombies and demons. Again, there are more, as the game goes on, more and more creature types come out and more tribes come out for each color, but that's the main focus from the, when you look, you're going to see mostly zombies and demons. Its interactions with your opponent are it can interact, but sometimes it usually likes to play with itself, and no, that's not a play on words. It usually doesn't really give a shit what your opponent's doing. It wants to do its thing, search for its pieces, and then combo out. It can interact with its opponents, but, it's usually not as heavy as the other colors. Alright. The final color is blue. It's the color of the mind, or the color of thought. Red and green are its enemy colors. Its main focus is usually counter magic, so making so that your opponent doesn't, or when it casts a spell, it counters it so it doesn't actually take effect, and drawing cards. And yes, drawing cards in Magic, while they didn't know this at first, is the most effective way of winning a game. Card draw is pretty much key in almost any Magic game. If you run out of fuel in your hand, if you don't have any cards to play, you're pretty much dead in the water, and you're just top decking or drawing the card off the top of your library and then hoping that it's the answer. Card draw is the most powerful effect in the game of Magic. We learned that very early on when they didn't realize how effective a card like Ancestral Recall was. The main creatures for blue are usually wizards and merfolk, merfolk being the most prominent. And it's probably the most interactive color of the five, basically because usually you're sitting back waiting for your opponent to do something, and then you're going to counter it, bounce, or return whatever it played to its owner's hand, all that stuff. It's the most interactive as far as usually waiting for your opponent to do something before you do something. And I'm going to reiterate what I said before. Green and red are usually the easiest to learn. The reason for that is they use the most common methods to win normally, which is through combat and direct damage. White is the middle, because it uses combat but has the most spells that wipe boards, so it literally sits there and makes people build, and then you wipe whatever they put out, and then everybody starts all over. And white does include your own stuff when it wipes, just so you understand. Black and blue would be the hardest, blue being the most hard, because black uses its own life as a resource to gain advantages, and blue because you have to learn how to not play Magic in a typical sense. So as I was explaining, blue usually waits for your opponent to do something before you do anything. Whereas all the other colors usually want to play their creatures and their spells and, start doing damage. Blue likes to sit and wait. It's kind of a hurry up and wait kind of color. Sure, there are exceptions. Like if you do a fish deck or merfolk, it's basically like playing a green deck like an elf deck, where you play your lords, which is something that gives +1/+1 to all your other whatevers. And in this case with blue, it's merfolk. Yeah, it can do that. But most strategies with blue are hurry up and wait. You play your land, you say go, you hope that you have an answer in your hand, you wait for your opponent to play it, and you answer it. So it's a little harder. A lot of people can't wrap their head around that at first, but eventually they get there. So, and that's just a basic overview of the color schemes and how they interact in Magic. It's not like the end-all be-all. It's just a small, quick overview. I realize that these videos that I make are usually focused around beginners, so I wanted to make sure that I went over that with everybody. And like I said, it's just a basic overview. So if you have any questions or concerns, If you have any suggestions on anything, if you want to hear about anything, I'm always around. So just go ahead, go to the Facebook page, send me a message, ask me any questions you want. I'm always here. So that is my show for the week. If you have, again, any questions or concerns, Facebook is Blue Bears Games. You can email me at bluebearsgames@gmail.com, or you can put a message in the comments section here below, and I'll definitely get back to you as soon as possible. That's my time for the week. Please do me the favor, like, subscribe, and share. We actually hit 300 this week, so that means we're giving away a code. Woohoo! I'll go ahead and get into that into next week's video as to how we're going to go about doing that. And then, like I said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even suggestions, go through, you know how to contact me. I'll have it up here on the screen. Other than that, thank you for your time. Stay safe this week, and I will see you guys all next week.